Gallup's got a new ranking of the world's happiest countries, and shocker, the US isn't at the top. Plus, Jordan Peele proves he's more than a one-hit wonder with his latest movie's record-breaking debut. We'll have all the details ahead. This is Relevant Daily.
Relevant Daily.
Hey everyone, Daz here at Relevant HQ. Welcome to Relevant Daily, where we bring you what's happening at the intersection of faith and culture. Those stories are coming up, but first, I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you need a landing page, a beautiful gallery, a professional blog, or an online store, it's all possible with Squarespace. They have award-winning templates, customizable settings, and powerful e-commerce solutions, all without a single plugin. Right now, Squarespace is offering Relevant Daily viewers a special deal. You can head over to squarespace.com/relevant for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your site, you can use offer code RELEVANT to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I've used Squarespace for years now, and I love it. It's super easy. Squarespace.com/relevant for that special deal. Now, we welcome to Relevant Daily, Relevant Senior Editor, Tyler Huckabee. Tyler, how's it going?
Hey, Daz.
So I understand our first story today has to do with something called the World Happiness Index. What exactly is that?
It's sort of a weird name for a very weird, nebulous concept. Every year Gallup does this. They do a huge global survey to try to figure out what countries in the world are the happiest. And that's a very nebulous concept, so they use something that they call the ladder analogy. There's a ladder, it's got 10 rungs on it. The rung at the very top represents your absolute best possible life. The bottom rung represents the worst. Then they ask you which step on this rung would you fall at? Where do you land? And they use that to sort of determine which countries are the happiest. It's not like super scientific or anything, but it's the standardized metaphor that we're running with. And then they try to use the results of that to compare that to how their countries are doing economically, politically, socially, and see if any patterns emerge.
Okay, got it. So take us to the rankings. What were some of the top countries on the happiness index?
Well, as per usual, this probably won't be a huge surprise to anybody who follows along with these sorts of rankings.
Yeah.
But those Nordic countries continue to really come through. Finland, Denmark, and Norway are numbers 1, 2, and 3, respectively. They usually are. Nordic countries have very healthy economies. They've got strong social safety nets. People who live there have long lifespans. There's a good education system there. These are all things that very loosely are able to kind of correlate with the general happiness and people who live in these countries. Right after them, you've got Iceland and the Netherlands. That rounds up the top 5. And then the rest of the top 10 are Switzerland, Sweden, New Zealand, Canada, and Austria. And then if you want to know where we ended up here in the US, we've actually dropped a little bit over the last few years. We're now at number 19 on the Global Happiness, just barely cracking in the top 20 there on the Global Happiness Index.
Yeah, not exactly surprising. I don't know.
I'd say I feel medium happy most of the time, so maybe it's not that surprising.
Yeah, I do wonder what it is about those Nordic Scandinavian countries, though. They certainly conjure the image of a simpler way of living, I think.
Sure. And there's a few things that we can sort of draw from the report. A few things that all the happy countries, or happier countries at least, have in common. They got really strong economies. There's lots of freedom, lots of opportunity, but there's also a really strong social network. Communities who are able to be generous with each other. They have a network where they're able to fall back on, so that reduces, obviously, poverty. Like I said, lifespans are a big deal. A good healthcare system definitely leads to happier countries. And then another big one, lack of social corruption. People have a strong confidence that if you break the rules, you're going to get caught and face some time for it. That's not something, obviously, that every country has, but it does. When you put that in place, it makes the country happier.
Wow, that adds some substance to that kind of nebulous idea you were talking about before. That seems to make more sense.
And then speaking of happy countries, are not necessarily happy, but in this case, some very good news for a few people today. I did want to talk a little bit about Us and the performance of Jordan Peele's latest movie. I did it in the box office over the weekend. You saw it, right?
Yeah, and you saw it twice, I believe.
I did see it twice. So part of its strong performance, we deserve at least a little bit of a pat on the back for this news story here.
Of course.
But as I think you even wrote about this on the site, Daz. Most box office predictions for us had it pulling in something around $35 million, but it more than doubled that prediction over the weekend. Over 70, I believe $70.3 million that this pulled in. That's a record for an original horror movie, for a non-sequel horror movie. And it's proof, I think, that Jordan Peele is kind of becoming a brand unto himself. He's sort of, in a way we haven't really seen since maybe a Spielberg type situation, or maybe Fincher, one of those guys. You go to see it just because he did it, and you think you're going to like his movies because of what he's got behind him. Yeah, exactly. He has weight, and then this is kind of coming in the middle of a huge trend in horror. The last 3 years have seen the top 3 horror openings of all time. It in 2017, and the Halloween reboot in 2018 was second best, and Us made, as you said, $70 million, which is third best all time. So not only is Jordan Peele kind of his own brand at this point, but horror as a whole has tons of momentum. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's because a lot of us were raised on really bad horror movies for a long time in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. Horror movies weren't known for Oscar bait. They didn't get good actors. They didn't, like, you went to kind of turn your brain off and watch some bad special effects and a not very satisfying story. That's not really the case anymore. Tours are drawn to horror. They wrestle with interesting topics and they resonate really well. Another kind of interesting wrinkle to all of this is how much Us is overperforming does hint at sort of a trend, and how box office predictions deal with movies made by black creators, starring largely black casts like Us does. They have consistently overperformed, and I think that shows that there's maybe some gaps in the box office prediction methodology that we're using right now that doesn't account for the fact that audiences definitely turn up for these black created films. Black Panther was the same story. It had very modest, successful, but modest expectations that it blew out of the water on the opening weekend. Us is doing the same thing, and I hope that means that people who chart these things are going to start to figure out that this is an important trend too, and it's very successful. Yeah, I think that's a super important part of it, and it has me excited to see how far Us rides the wave. I think what's cool about this movie is part of the narrative is that it seems to require you to go see it twice, like you did. I know I've already pre-purchased my ticket to see it a second time, and I think that's cool that that's part of the story, and that could really affect its returns for weekends 2 and 3 and 4. I recommend a repeat viewing for sure. I'll be interested to hear how your next viewing goes. Awesome. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us. That will do it for this episode of Relevant Daily. For more coverage from Relevant on the intersections of faith and culture, you can follow us on Twitter @Relevant, or go to our Facebook and Instagram feeds @Relevant Magazine. Of course, you can always visit our homepage, relevantmagazine.com. For more episodes of this, we have a podcast edition of Relevant Daily. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, hit subscribe and hit us with the 5-star rating. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tyler Daswick from Relevant Headquarters. We'll see you tomorrow.
Relevant Daily.